Ben Murphy sat quietly in the uncomfortable plastic chair of the emergency room waiting area. His hands rested on his knees as he watched his 9-year-old son Tim lying on the examination bed nearby. The boy's ankle was wrapped in a temporary bandage, and his soccer uniform was still muddy from the afternoon game where he had twisted his foot during practice. "Dad, when can we go home?" Tim asked, shifting uncomfortably on the thin hospital mattress. "Soon, buddy. The doctor just wants to make sure nothing is broken," Ben replied with a reassuring smile. He had been a single father for 3 years now, ever since his wife Sarah passed away in a car accident. Every injury, every fever, every scraped knee felt heavier when you were the only parent responsible for making the right decisions. The emergency room was busier than usual for a Tuesday evening. Ben counted at least 15 other families waiting for treatment. Nurses moved quickly between rooms, their soft-soled shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The familiar sounds of medical equipment beeped steadily from behind closed doors, creating a rhythm that had become oddly comforting during their 2-hour wait. Ben pulled out his phone to check the time. 7:30 in the evening. He mentally calculated whether they would make it home in time for Tim's favorite television show. These small routines had become important anchors in their life together, especially after losing Sarah. The automatic doors at the emergency room entrance suddenly burst open with a loud whoosh. Ben looked up to see a young woman rushing through, carrying a small child in her arms. The woman had shoulder-length brown hair that was messy and damp with sweat. Her eyes were wide with panic, and she was breathing heavily as if she had been running. "Help! Please, somebody help my daughter," the woman called out desperately. Ben immediately noticed the child in her arms. The little girl appeared to be around 4 years old, with blonde curly hair and pale skin. She was conscious but clearly struggling. Her breathing sounded wrong, like air was fighting to move through a narrow space. The sound was unlike anything Ben had heard before, a strange whistling wheeze that seemed to come and go with each breath. 2 nurses rushed forward immediately. The first nurse, a tall woman with graying hair, quickly guided the mother toward an empty examination room. The second nurse, younger with kind eyes, began asking rapid questions as they walked. "What's her name? How long has she been breathing like this? Any known allergies?" "Her name is Emma," the mother said, her voice shaking. "Lisa, I'm Lisa Chen. This started about an hour ago. No allergies that we know of. She was playing in her room, and then suddenly she couldn't breathe right." Ben watched as they disappeared into room 7, directly across from where he and Tim were waiting. Through the small window in the door, he could see the nurses working quickly to get Emma situated on the bed. Lisa paced back and forth beside her daughter, running her hands through her own hair repeatedly. Within minutes, Dr. Rodriguez, the emergency physician who had been treating Tim, hurried toward Emma's room. Ben had found Dr. Rodriguez to be professional and thorough, with over 20 years of emergency medicine experience. If anyone could figure out what was wrong with the little girl, it would be him. "Dad, what's happening?" Tim asked, propping himself up on his elbows to get a better view. "Another sick child, son. The doctors will take good care of her," Ben answered, though he felt a knot forming in his stomach. Something about Emma's breathing pattern bothered him in a way he couldn't quite explain. Dr. Rodriguez spent nearly 30 minutes in Emma's room. Ben could see him through the window, listening to her chest with his stethoscope, checking her throat with a light, and speaking quietly with the nurses. When he finally emerged, his expression looked puzzled rather than confident. "Could you page Dr. Patterson from Pediatrics?" Dr. Rodriguez asked the nurse at the station. "I want a second opinion on the girl in room 7. Dr. Patterson arrived 15 minutes later. She was a specialist in treating children, with a reputation for solving difficult cases. Ben watched as she entered Emma's room with the same focused energy that Dr. Rodriguez had shown. Through the window, he could see her performing similar examinations, but her time with Emma stretched even longer. When Dr. Patterson came out, she was already on her phone calling someone. "Yes, this is Dr. Patterson. I need Dr. Kim from respiratory therapy down here immediately. We have a 4-year-old with unusual breathing distress that's not responding to standard treatments. Ben felt his worry growing stronger. Tim had fallen asleep on the examination bed, exhausted from the long day and the pain medication they had given him for his ankle. The X-rays had shown no broken bones, but they were waiting for the final paperwork before discharge. Dr. Kim arrived with a cart full of respiratory equipment. Ben had seen similar setups before during Tim's early childhood when he had suffered from seasonal allergies. The respiratory therapist was a middle-aged man with steady hands and a calm demeanor. He wheeled his equipment into Emma's room and began what appeared to be breathing treatments. Lisa stood pressed against the wall of the room, watching every move the medical team made. Her face showed the kind of terror that only a parent can understand. Ben remembered that feeling from 3 years ago when Tim had experienced his own frightening medical emergency during their camping trip. After 45 minutes, Dr. Kim emerged from the room, shaking his head. Ben could hear him speaking to Dr. Rodriguez in the hallway. I've tried every standard protocol. Albuterol, corticosteroids, even epinephrine in case of severe allergic reaction. Nothing is making a difference. Her oxygen levels are stable, but that breathing pattern is unlike anything I've encountered. Dr. Rodriguez nodded gravely. Let me call Dr. Foster from pulmonology. Maybe she'll have some insights. The next hour became a blur of medical professionals entering and leaving Emma's room. Dr. Foster, the lung specialist, spent considerable time examining Emma and reviewing her charts. She called in Dr. Martinez, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, thinking the problem might be related to Emma's upper airway. Ben watched Dr. Martinez use specialized instruments to look inside Emma's nose and throat. The examination seemed thorough, but when he finished, his expression showed the same confusion that had marked all the previous doctors' faces. The airway appears clear, Ben heard Dr. Martinez tell the team. No visible obstructions, no swelling, no signs of infection or trauma. As the evening progressed, more specialists arrived. Dr. Thompson, a pediatric cardiologist, worried that Emma's heart might be causing the breathing difficulties. Dr. Lee, a neurologist, wondered if some kind of nerve problem was affecting her respiratory muscles. Each doctor brought their own expertise and equipment, but none could provide the answer Lisa desperately needed. Ben counted the professionals as they came and went. Emergency physicians, pediatric specialists, respiratory therapists, cardiologists, neurologists, radiologists, pharmacists, and even a toxicologist who wondered if Emma had been exposed to some kind of poison. The number kept growing as word spread through the hospital about the unusual case. Emma's condition remained stable but unchanged. She was conscious and alert, able to speak in short phrases, but the strange breathing pattern continued. Lisa had not left her daughter's side except to use the bathroom, and hospital staff had brought her coffee and a sandwich that remained untouched on the counter. Around 11 o'clock at night, Ben heard Dr. Rodriguez making another phone call. Is Dr. Williams still in the building? We have a case down here that's stumping everyone. Could she take a look? Dr. Williams was the chief of pediatrics, known throughout the hospital for her ability to diagnose difficult cases. When she arrived, she brought with her Dr. Nash, another senior physician who specialized in rare childhood conditions. Both doctors spent considerable time with Emma, reviewing all the previous notes and test results. They ordered additional blood work and even considered doing a CT scan of her chest and throat. Ben could see the intensity of their discussions through the room's window. But after 2 hours, even these experienced doctors emerged with the same baffled expressions. Dr. Williams spoke quietly with Lisa, explaining that they were exploring every possibility but had not yet found the cause of Emma's breathing difficulties. By 1 o'clock in the morning, Ben had counted 22 different medical professionals who had examined Emma or consulted on her case. Nurses, doctors, specialists, technicians, and consultants had all applied their knowledge and experience, but the little girl continued to struggle with each breath. Tim had woken up briefly when a nurse brought his discharge papers, but Ben asked if they could stay a little longer. Something about the situation across the hall had captured his complete attention, though he couldn't quite understand why. Lisa looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying and worry. Emma had managed to fall asleep despite her breathing difficulties, but even in sleep, the strange whistling sound continued with each breath she took. Dr. Rodriguez approached Ben's area, looking defeated. "I'm sorry for the delay with your discharge. We've been dealing with a very complex case tonight." "That little girl?" Ben asked. "Yes. In 23 years of emergency medicine, I've never encountered anything quite like this. Her symptoms don't match any condition we know, and nothing we've tried has helped." Ben stood up and walked closer to Emma's room. Through the window, he could see the child sleeping peacefully despite her labored breathing. Something about the sound pattern nagged at his memory, like a song he couldn't quite remember but knew he had heard before. As he stood there watching, Ben felt a strange certainty growing inside him. Somewhere in his past experience as a father, he had encountered something similar. The memory was buried deep, but it was definitely there, waiting to be uncovered. Ben stood at the window of Emma's room, watching the little girl's chest rise and fall with each difficult breath. The strange whistling sound echoed in the quiet hallway, and something deep in his mind began to stir. He pressed his hand against the cool glass, trying to focus on the memory that seemed just out of reach. Tim shifted on his examination bed behind him. "Dad, are we going home soon? My ankle feels better now." "In a few minutes, buddy," Ben replied softly, though his attention remained fixed on Emma. The sound of her breathing was so familiar, yet he couldn't quite place where he had heard it before. Lisa sat in a chair beside her daughter's bed, holding Emma's small hand. Dark circles had formed under her eyes, and her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. She had been awake for nearly 18 hours, watching 22 different medical professionals examine her child without finding any answers. Dr. Rodriguez walked past Ben, carrying a thick folder of test results and consultation notes. He paused when he noticed Ben standing at the window. "I know this must be difficult to watch," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. "You have a child of your own. I can only imagine how this mother must be feeling." Ben nodded slowly. "Has anyone considered that it might be something simple? Something that looks complicated but actually has a basic cause?" Dr. Rodriguez rubbed his tired eyes. "We've checked everything we can think of. Blood tests, X-rays, throat examinations, lung function tests. Every specialist in the hospital has looked at her case. If there was something simple, we would have found it by now." As Dr. Rodriguez walked away, Ben felt a sudden flash of memory. It was like looking at an old photograph that had been hidden in a drawer for years. The image was fuzzy at first, but slowly became clearer. 3 years ago. Tim was 6 years old. They had gone on a camping trip to Lake Morrison, about 2 hours north of the city. It was their first major trip after Sarah's death, and Ben had been determined to create good memories for his son. The memory became stronger. Ben could almost smell the pine trees and feel the cool mountain air. They had set up their tent near the lake, and Tim had been so excited about cooking marshmallows over the campfire that evening. But something had gone wrong during dinner. Ben closed his eyes and let the memory flow back completely. They had been eating sandwiches that Ben had packed for their first night. Simple food, nothing fancy. Peanut butter and jelly on white bread, wrapped in clear plastic wrap to keep them fresh. Tim had been talking excitedly about the fish they might catch the next morning when suddenly his voice changed. At first, Ben thought his son was just being silly, making funny voices like children often do. But then Tim's breathing became labored. The breathing sound was exactly like Emma's. Ben's heart began to race as the memory became crystal clear. Tim had developed the same strange whistling wheeze, the same pattern of struggling for air that didn't quite look like choking or asthma. It had been terrifying because they were miles from the nearest hospital, with no cell phone service and no other campers nearby. Ben had tried everything he could think of. He had checked Tim's mouth for food that might be stuck. He had performed the basic first aid he remembered from a parenting class. He had even tried to make Tim drink water, thinking something might be caught in his throat. Nothing had worked. Tim's breathing had gotten worse, and Ben had felt completely helpless. But then something strange had happened. Tim had coughed violently, and suddenly he could breathe normally again. The whistling sound stopped immediately, and Tim had looked confused about what had just occurred. Ben had examined everything around their campsite, trying to understand what had caused the problem. That's when he found it near their picnic table. A small piece of clear plastic wrap, about the size of a quarter, that had somehow gotten loose from their food packaging. When Ben had asked Tim what happened, his son had explained that he thought he saw a piece of food on the ground. When he picked it up to throw it away, he had accidentally breathed it in instead of seeing what it actually was. The plastic wrap had been nearly invisible, especially in the dim light around their campfire. It had gotten stuck deep in Tim's throat, but not in the way that normal choking occurs. Instead of completely blocking his airway, it had created a partial blockage that acted like a one-way valve. Ben remembered researching the incident when they returned home. He had learned that certain types of obstructions could create breathing patterns that looked like asthma attacks or allergic reactions. The plastic had been positioned in such a way that air could move past it, but with great difficulty, creating the whistling sound. Now, standing in the hospital hallway 3 years later, Ben realized that Emma's breathing sounded exactly like Tim's had that night at the lake. Ben looked around the emergency room. All the medical professionals had tried sophisticated treatments and complex diagnoses. They had used advanced equipment and called in specialists from every department. But none of them had considered the possibility of something as simple as a small piece of transparent material stuck in the child's throat. The more Ben thought about it, the more convinced he became. Emma's symptoms matched Tim's experience perfectly. The strange breathing pattern, the way she could still speak but with difficulty, the fact that her oxygen levels remained stable while she struggled to breathe normally. But Ben hesitated. Who was he to suggest something that 22 doctors and medical professionals had not considered? He was a construction worker, not a medical expert. He had learned to read blueprints and operate heavy machinery, not diagnose medical conditions. What if he was wrong? What if he interrupted the medical team with a foolish suggestion based on one experience from years ago? The doctors might think he was interfering with their work, or worse, that he was some kind of person who thought he knew better than trained professionals. Ben looked back at Emma's room. Lisa was stroking her daughter's hair while the little girl slept fitfully. Even in sleep, Emma's breathing remained labored and strange. Every few seconds, the whistling sound would echo through the quiet room. Dr. Williams, the chief of pediatrics, emerged from the room carrying another set of test results. She paused at the nurse's station to review the paperwork, her expression showing the same frustration that had marked every other doctor's face throughout the night. "Any new ideas?" asked the nurse on duty. "We're running out of conventional options," Dr. Williams replied. "I'm considering calling Children's Hospital downtown to see if they have any specialists we haven't consulted yet." Ben felt his resolve strengthening. Emma had been suffering for hours while medical professionals exhausted every complex possibility. If there was even a small chance that his experience could help, didn't he have a responsibility to speak up? He thought about Sarah and how she had always encouraged him to trust his instincts, especially when it came to taking care of Tim. She used to say that sometimes the simplest explanation was the right one, even when experts made things complicated. Ben walked over to the nurse's station where Dr. Williams was standing. His hands felt sweaty, and his heart was beating faster than normal. "Excuse me, Dr. Williams," Ben said quietly. She looked up from her paperwork. "Yes. Are you the father of the boy with the ankle injury?" "Yes, but I wanted to talk to you about the little girl, Emma. I know this might sound strange, but I think I might know what's wrong with her." Dr. Williams raised her eyebrows. "You're not a medical professional, are you?" "No, I'm not. But 3 years ago, my son had exactly the same breathing problem. The same sound, the same symptoms. And it turned out to be something very simple that was hard to see. Dr. Williams set down her paperwork and looked at Ben more carefully. What kind of simple thing? A small piece of clear plastic wrap. It got stuck in his throat, but not like normal choking. It created a partial blockage that made breathing difficult but didn't completely stop his airway. Ben could see Dr. Williams processing this information. She glanced toward Emma's room, then back at Ben. You said the symptoms were exactly the same. The breathing pattern, the whistling sound, everything. My son could still talk and his oxygen was okay, but he struggled with every breath. Just like Emma is doing now. Dr. Williams was quiet for a moment. Ben could see her thinking through the possibility. After hours of complex tests and specialist consultations, was it possible that the answer was something incredibly simple? Where did this happen with your son? She asked. On a camping trip. He accidentally inhaled a piece of plastic wrap from our food packaging. It was almost impossible to see because it was clear and thin. Dr. Williams nodded slowly. We did examine her throat multiple times, but we were looking for typical obstructions or signs of swelling and infection. This would be different, Ben explained. The plastic was positioned in a way that created a valve effect. Air could move past it, but with difficulty. From the outside, it didn't look like normal choking. Ben watched as Dr. Williams considered his suggestion. He could see her weighing the possibility against everything the medical team had already tried. The timing fits, she said thoughtfully. Her mother said this started while Emma was playing in her room. Children that age put things in their mouths without thinking. And clear plastic wrap would be almost invisible during a regular throat examination, Ben added. Dr. Williams looked toward Emma's room again. Lisa was still sitting beside her daughter, holding her hand and whispering soft words of comfort. Emma stirred in her sleep, and the strange whistling sound continued. Would you be willing to explain this to our medical team? Dr. Williams asked. If there's any chance you're right, we need to explore this possibility immediately. Ben felt a mix of relief and nervousness. Of course. I just want to help if I can. Dr. Williams called for Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Martinez, the ear, nose, and throat specialist, to join them at the nurse's station. When they arrived, she explained Ben's suggestion and his experience with his son. Ben told the story again, describing exactly what had happened with Tim and how they had discovered the plastic wrap. He explained the valve effect and how it had created breathing symptoms that looked like other medical conditions. Dr. Martinez listened carefully, nodding as Ben spoke. It's possible, he said. If the material was thin enough and positioned correctly, it could create exactly the symptoms we're seeing. And clear plastic wrap would be extremely difficult to spot during a standard examination. Dr. Rodriguez looked thoughtful. It would explain why none of our treatments have worked. We've been treating respiratory conditions, but this would be a mechanical obstruction. Should we examine her throat again? Dr. Williams asked. This time looking specifically for something transparent and thin. Dr. Martinez nodded. We'll need to use different equipment and lighting. If there's plastic wrap in her airway, we need to approach this very carefully. The removal process will require precision to avoid pushing it deeper or causing damage. Ben felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. If he was right, Emma could be breathing normally within minutes. But if he was wrong, he had just wasted valuable time when the medical team should have been exploring other options. Let's go talk to the mother, Dr. Williams said. We need her permission to try a different type of examination. As they walked toward Emma's room, Ben offered a silent prayer that his memory had been accurate and that Emma would soon be breathing easily again. Dr. Williams knocked gently on Emma's room door before entering with Ben, Dr. Rodriguez, and Dr. Martinez following behind her. Lisa looked up from her chair beside Emma's bed, her eyes immediately filling with concern at seeing the group of people. Is everything all right? Has something changed? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma stirred slightly but remained asleep, her breathing still producing that strange whistling sound that had puzzled every medical professional throughout the night. Dr. Williams approached Lisa carefully. "Mrs. Chen, we have a new possibility we'd like to explore. This gentleman, Ben Murphy, had an experience with his son that might be relevant to Emma's condition." Lisa looked at Ben with desperate hope. "What kind of experience?" Ben stepped forward, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. 3 years ago, my son had exactly the same breathing problem as Emma. It turned out to be a small piece of clear plastic wrap stuck in his throat. The plastic created a partial blockage that made breathing difficult but didn't completely stop his airway. Lisa's eyes widened. Plastic wrap. But how would Emma get plastic wrap? Children sometimes pick up small pieces of clear material without realizing what they are, Dr. Martinez explained. If Emma was playing in her room and found a small piece of plastic, she might have accidentally inhaled it while examining it. Dr. Williams continued, "We'd like to examine Emma's throat again, but this time we'll be looking specifically for something transparent and very thin. If Mr. Murphy is correct, this could explain why our previous treatments haven't worked." Lisa looked down at her sleeping daughter, then back at the medical team. "Will the examination hurt her?" "We'll be very gentle," Dr. Martinez assured her. "We'll use specialized equipment and lighting that will help us see anything that might be nearly invisible. If we do find plastic material, we can remove it safely." "Please," Lisa said, tears forming in her eyes. "Try anything that might help her." Dr. Martinez left the room to gather the specific equipment he would need. Ben stood near the wall, watching as Dr. Williams and Dr. Rodriguez prepared Emma for the examination. His heart was beating fast, and he found himself thinking about Tim sleeping peacefully in the other room, completely unaware that his father was trying to save another child's life. When Dr. Martinez returned, he was pushing a cart loaded with different types of lighting equipment and specialized instruments. "This is going to give us much better visibility than our standard throat examination tools," he explained to Lisa. Lisa gently woke Emma, stroking her daughter's hair softly. "Emma, sweetie, the doctors need to look in your throat again. Can you be brave for mommy?" Emma opened her eyes slowly, looking confused and tired. When she tried to speak, her voice was raspy from hours of difficult breathing. "Mommy, why does it still hurt to breathe?" "The doctors are going to fix it, baby," Lisa said, though Ben could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Dr. Martinez positioned his equipment carefully. The new lighting system was much brighter than the standard examination lights, and it cast shadows differently throughout the room. He also had a series of small mirrors and fiber optic instruments that would allow him to see areas of Emma's throat that might have been missed during previous examinations. "Emma, I need you to open your mouth very wide and try to stay still," Dr. Martinez said in a gentle voice. "I know this might feel uncomfortable, but it will only take a few minutes." Emma nodded bravely and opened her mouth. Dr. Martinez began his examination slowly and carefully, using the enhanced lighting to examine every surface of her throat. Ben watched anxiously, hoping desperately that his memory had been accurate. For the first few minutes, Dr. Martinez worked in silence, moving his instruments carefully and adjusting the lighting from different angles. Lisa held Emma's hand, whispering encouraging words while her daughter remained as still as possible. Then Dr. Martinez paused. He adjusted his position slightly and directed the light toward a specific area deeper in Emma's throat. "There," he said quietly. "I can see something." Ben felt his heart skip a beat. Dr. Williams and Dr. Rodriguez moved closer to get a better view. "What is it?" Lisa asked urgently. Dr. Martinez continued his careful examination. "It appears to be a small piece of transparent material, positioned in a way that's creating a partial obstruction." Mr. Murphy was correct. Relief and anxiety flooded through Ben simultaneously. He had been right about the cause, but now came the delicate process of removing the plastic without causing any damage to Emma's throat. "Can you get it out?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, but we need to be extremely careful," Dr. Martinez replied. The material appears to be positioned like a flap that's interfering with normal airflow. I'm going to use specialized forceps to grasp it gently and remove it without pushing it deeper. Dr. Martinez selected a pair of very thin forceps from his instrument tray. The tools looked almost like tiny tweezers, but they were designed specifically for delicate procedures in small spaces. Emma, I need you to stay very still now, Dr. Martinez said. You might feel some pressure, but I'll be as gentle as possible. Emma squeezed her mother's hand tighter but remained motionless. Ben found himself holding his breath as Dr. Martinez carefully maneuvered the forceps toward the plastic material. The procedure seemed to take forever, though Ben knew it was probably only a few minutes. Dr. Martinez worked with incredible precision, adjusting his approach several times to ensure he had a secure grip on the plastic without disturbing the surrounding tissue. Almost got it, Dr. Martinez murmured, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. Then, with one smooth motion, he withdrew the forceps. Attached to the end was a small piece of clear plastic wrap, about the size of a quarter, just as Ben remembered from Tim's experience. The change in Emma's breathing was immediate and dramatic. The strange whistling sound stopped completely. Emma's breathing became smooth and natural for the first time in hours. Her chest rose and fell in a normal rhythm, and the look of strain disappeared from her face. Oh my goodness, Lisa gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. She's breathing normally. Emma sat up in bed, looking confused but relieved. Mommy, I can breathe better now. What was that thing? Dr. Martinez held up the small piece of plastic wrap so everyone could see it. This little piece of plastic was stuck in your throat, making it hard for air to move properly. But it's gone now, and you should feel much better. Emma took several deep breaths, as if testing her newly cleared airway. It doesn't hurt anymore, she said with amazement. Lisa turned to Ben with tears in her eyes. How can I ever thank you? You saved my daughter's life. Ben felt overwhelmed with emotion. I just remembered what happened with my son. I'm so glad it helped. Dr. Williams looked at the piece of plastic wrap that Dr. Martinez had placed in a specimen container. This is exactly what you described, Mr. Murphy. It created a valve effect that made breathing difficult but didn't completely block the airway. Dr. Rodriguez shook his head in wonder. In 23 years of emergency medicine, I've never seen anything quite like this. The symptoms perfectly mimicked several other serious conditions. Emma was now sitting up in bed, chatting excitedly with her mother about how much better she felt. Her color had returned to normal, and she was speaking in full sentences without any difficulty. Can we go home now? Emma asked Lisa. Dr. Williams smiled. We'll want to observe you for just a little while longer to make sure everything is working properly, but yes, you should be able to go home soon. Ben walked over to Lisa, who was still crying with relief and gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, Lisa said. 22 doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, and you knew exactly what it was. I was just lucky that my son had the same experience, Ben replied. 3 years ago, I felt so helpless when Tim was struggling to breathe and I didn't know how to help him. I never imagined that awful night would someday help another child. Lisa hugged Ben tightly. You turned the worst night of my life into a miracle. Emma could have died if you hadn't spoken up. Ben felt a profound sense of connection to this moment. 3 years ago, when Sarah had died and he had struggled alone with Tim's medical emergency during their camping trip, he had felt like the most inadequate father in the world. He had questioned whether he could really take care of his son without Sarah's help and guidance. But tonight, that difficult experience had given him the knowledge to save another child's life. The worst moment of his parenting journey had somehow prepared him to be someone else's answer to prayer. Dr. Williams approached Ben as the other medical staff began completing Emma's paperwork. Mr. Murphy, what you did tonight was remarkable. Your willingness to share your experience, even when you weren't sure if it was relevant, made all the difference. I almost didn't say anything, Ben admitted. I thought you might think I was interfering. Never hesitate to speak up when a child's life might be at stake, Dr. Williams said firmly. Medical professionals don't have all the answers. Sometimes the most important insights come from real-world experiences that we haven't encountered in our textbooks. Ben looked across the hall toward Tim's room, where his son was sleeping peacefully. Tim's ankle was healing well, and they would finally be going home soon. But more importantly, Ben realized that they had both played a part in saving Emma's life tonight. As the medical team finished their final checks on Emma, Ben reflected on how much his life had changed since Sarah's death. He had learned to be both mother and father to Tim, to trust his instincts as a parent, and to find strength in experiences that had once seemed like failures. Emma was laughing now, telling her mother about a funny dream she had while sleeping. The sound of her clear, easy breathing filled the room like music. Lisa kept touching her daughter's face and hair, as if she couldn't quite believe that the crisis was really over. "Mr. Murphy," Emma called out to Ben. "Thank you for helping me breathe again." Ben smiled at the little girl who looked so much healthier than she had just an hour earlier. "You're very welcome, Emma. I'm so glad you're feeling better." As Ben prepared to take Tim home, he realized that tonight had taught him something important about purpose and healing. Sometimes the most painful experiences in life become the foundation for helping others. His struggle as a single father, his moment of terror during Tim's emergency, and even his grief over losing Sarah had all somehow prepared him for this moment. Emma would go home healthy and safe. Lisa would sleep peacefully knowing her daughter was out of danger. And Ben would return to his quiet life with Tim, carrying the knowledge that when it mattered most, he had been exactly where he needed to be, with exactly the right experience to make a difference. The impossible had indeed been turned around, not by advanced medical technology or years of training, but by one father's willingness to trust his memory and speak up for a child in need.